Imagine boarding a red-eye transatlantic flight as a quiet passenger in jeans and a hoodie. You find your seat 2A, settle in, and then overhear two seasoned flight attendants whispering about the CEO you've only ever seen in glossy magazines. What does it feel like to hear your own name spoken in hushed tones, critiqued, misunderstood, unseen? Welcome aboard VistaLux Airlines Flight VL203, where founder Quentin Hale goes undercover to discover the hidden truths of his airline. From the polished leather seats to the hushed galley beyond the curtain, he listens to complaints about token diversity efforts, stalled promotions, and midnight exhaustion. But when he finally reveals his identity at 35,000 feet, everything changes. Is it possible to transform an entire corporate culture from within? Can empathy and accountability replace silent resentment? Join us as we unravel a story of power, prejudice, and the courage to listen. If you're curious how a single flight can ignite profound change, hit like, share this video, and subscribe to our channel. It's time to take your seat and prepare for the journey ahead. The terminal buzzed with its usual quiet chaos. Suitcases rolled across polished floors. Flight announcements murmured from distant speakers. Somewhere nearby, a child laughed, a woman sighed, and Quentin Hale stood quietly by Gate 17. He wore a faded black hoodie, jeans, running shoes with a scuffed sole, a plain ball cap pulled low over his eyes. To anyone watching, he was just another late-night traveler waiting for a red-eye across the Atlantic. But Quentin was anything but ordinary. He was the founder and owner of VistaLux Airlines. His name had been printed on Fortune magazine covers. He had once stood before an auditorium of investors and announced VistaLux's 100th transatlantic route to roaring applause. But tonight, no cameras, no speeches, no curated PR smiles. Tonight, he was flying under the radar, and, for the first time in years, he wasn't sure if he felt powerful or afraid. Earlier that week, his executive assistant had sent him another anonymous internal survey from cabin crew. Same themes: lack of opportunity, quiet bias, diversity for the brochure, not the boardroom. A few comments even mentioned his name, Quentin Hale, with resentment, confusion, or worse, apathy. He'd read those words in silence, then read them again. And then he'd booked himself a one-way first-class ticket from New York to Amsterdam on Flight VL203 under a quiet alias, Q. Hale. No security detail, no handlers, no one from corporate, just a man and his carry-on bag. The boarding announcement echoed overhead. First class was invited to board. He moved with the small cluster of priority passengers, eyes forward, shoulders relaxed. He offered a soft thank you to the gate agent as she scanned his boarding pass. Her smile didn't falter. She didn't recognize him. That felt strange, but also oddly liberating. As Quentin stepped into the jet bridge, a cool breeze from the aircraft's ventilation system hit his face. A wave of nostalgia swept over him. The smell of recycled cabin air. The hush before boarding begins. The rhythm of jet engines tick into life. He'd grown up around planes. His father had worked ground ops at JFK. His mother had been a gate agent for nearly 20 years. Quentin spent most of his childhood watching departures through chain-link fences, building models of 747s, and dreaming of a day when he could fly not just on planes, but above expectations. That dream became VistaLux. Built from a single aging leased aircraft to a fleet of 67, the airline was his life's work. And for a while, the mission felt pure diversity, excellence, elegance in the skies. But somewhere along the way, something had changed. Tonight, he was here to find out what. "Welcome aboard," a young flight attendant said as he stepped through the aircraft door. Her tone was automatic, her eyes scanning for seat numbers. He offered a polite nod and moved down the aisle. VistaLux's first-class cabin was softly lit with indigo glow. Cream leather seats, wide and inviting, curved like private pods. A subtle citrus scent lingered in the air. Seat 2A. He slid into it slowly, placing his duffel bag beneath the seat in front of him. The flight was only half full in this cabin he'd have room to observe. Listen, that was the point. As he settled in, he glanced across the aisle. A couple in their 60s whispered over a crossword puzzle. The man laughed softly. The woman smacked his arm with mock annoyance. Normalcy. Quentin leaned his head back and closed his eyes for a moment. He let the sound of zippers, overhead bins, and shoe heels create a rhythm in his chest. Then he heard it. From behind the galley curtain ahead, barely above a whisper, came voices. Two women, laughing softly. Then one of them said something that froze him in place. "Ugh, please tell me this isn't the flight with another one of those fake VIPs again. Last time, we had that finance guy in 2A who ordered chamomile, like it was Dom Perignon." The other woman replied with a dry chuckle. "No idea. But I did hear corporates watching this route lately. Could be some mystery exec on board. Maybe even Hale himself." Hale, the first voice, snorted. "If it is him, he's probably in disguise. Hoodie and all. You know, playing the man of the people thing." "Please," the second voice said. "If Quentin Hale ever worked a single day on the cabin floor, I'll eat my badge. They say he cares about inclusion, but it's always the same story. Performative, predictable, and don't get me started on how long it takes for women like me to get promoted. Same. 3 years, 5 commendations, and I'm still stuck rolling carts at midnight." The curtain shifted. The voices disappeared into the galley. Quentin opened his eyes slowly. The hum of the aircraft, the occasional clang of luggage bins, the couple still chuckling over their crossword. Nothing had changed, but everything had changed. In a few sentences spoken in private, perhaps never meant to be heard, he'd glimpsed the raw truth he came here to find, and it stung. It stung more than he expected. He didn't feel angry, not yet. Mostly, he felt hollow. Had he really drifted so far from the frontline reality? Had all the newsletters, the town halls, the polished HR reports been just a curated echo chamber? He didn't know their names yet. He didn't know if they were just frustrated employees venting after a long shift, or reflections of a broader fracture in VistaLux's soul. But he knew one thing. He would find out, not with rage, not with speeches, but by listening. Seat 2A was no longer just a place to sit. It was a vantage point, and Quentin Hale was ready to hear everything. Quentin Hale sat still in seat 2A long after the voices from the galley faded. He wasn't sure what he expected to feel. Outrage, maybe, or indignation. Instead, he felt weight, a slow, sinking heaviness in his chest, like something important had been knocked loose and was drifting just out of reach. He stared at the closed curtain at the front of the cabin. Behind it were the voices, the opinions, the pain. They had spoken about him like a myth, like a corporation in human skin. Not a man, not a person, not someone who had once polished his father's work boots after his shift on the tarmac. The flight attendant walking down the aisle interrupted his thoughts. She was tall, with dark curls wrapped into a neat bun. Her expression was warm but neutral as she approached him with a tray of welcome drinks: sparkling water, orange juice, champagne. Her name tag read Serena. "Can I offer you something to start with?" "Sir." Her tone was professional, friendly, practiced. He hesitated a moment too long before answering. "Just water, please. Thank you." Serena nodded and handed him the glass, then moved gracefully to the next row. As she walked away, he studied her posture. Confident, efficient. She didn't know who he was. Neither did the other one. The other voice, the one with the sharpness. He didn't catch her name yet. As the aircraft slowly filled, Quentin sat quietly, observing. The energy in the cabin was a quiet kind of tense. Not uncomfortable, but not relaxed either. Passengers settled in. Coats were folded. Devices adjusted. Whispered conversations floated up from window seats. Soon after, the boarding was complete. The aircraft door closed with a soft clunk. A chime rang overhead. One of the captains came on the intercom with the usual greeting, calm, measured, vaguely cheerful. The aircraft began its pushback from the gate. Engines hummed louder. Quentin closed his eyes for a brief second, and then he heard it again. A soft curtain rustle, a whisper, the voices, Serena, and the second one, Lexi. He caught this time as a nearby passenger asked for her by name. She was shorter than Serena, blonde hair cropped into a stylish pixie cut. Her voice, when heard from behind the galley divider, carried a note of sarcasm even when she wasn't trying. "You know what bothers me the most," Lexi said. "No," Serena replied, "but I feel like you're about to tell me." Lexi chuckled, low and dry. "It's not even about the whole 'we're a family' thing they keep saying. I can handle corporate spin. I just hate being invisible. Invisible how Serena asked. You work your butt off, go the extra mile. And then they put some 22-year-old intern on the cover of the newsletter because she speaks 3 languages and has a pretty Instagram. Like I don't matter. Like none of us do. And they think Hale is this visionary. But where is he? When's the last time he stepped foot in coach or flew a red-eye? Quentin didn't move." Lexi continued. "I applied 3 times for lead flight supervisor. 3. They said I needed more interpersonal development. What does that even mean? I can lead a team blindfolded." Serena murmured something he couldn't hear. Then Lexi again. "Hale built this airline, sure. But if he really wanted to know how his company runs, he'd get on one of these flights and listen. Really listen." Quentin exhaled slowly through his nose. He was listening. The plane tilted upward, taking off into the night sky. The rumble underfoot was steady now. Seatbelt signs lit up in blue. The stars outside the window blurred slightly in motion. As the aircraft reached cruising altitude, the cabin lights dimmed. Only the reading lights above glowed, casting gentle cones over books and newspapers. Serena returned down the aisle to check on passengers. When she reached Quentin's seat, she smiled politely. "Let me know if you need anything at all. Mr. Hale." He looked up, startled. Had she recognized the name? But her tone hadn't changed. She was just reading from the manifest. "Appreciate it," he replied quietly. Serena gave a nod and moved on. He leaned back and rubbed a hand along his jaw. So far, they were doing their jobs well. The service was solid, professional, efficient, but beneath it was something else, something he couldn't quite name yet. There was a difference between doing the job and feeling valued while doing it. He understood now. This wasn't about two angry employees venting on a bad night. This was about something deeper, something more systemic. And maybe, he thought, he had helped build the very thing they were railing against. Later in the flight, the dinner service began. Quentin ordered the roasted salmon. It arrived hot and well-plated. Lexi served it. She didn't make eye contact. She didn't smile, either. He watched her move between rows, her efficiency unquestionable. But there was a tightness in her jaw, a slight narrowing of the eyes when passengers asked for small extras. She wasn't rude, just distant, detached. He wondered how long it took for that kind of emotional distance to set in. Months, years. How long had she been smiling through discomfort as he ate? He heard a soft call bell from behind. An elderly woman had accidentally spilled her drink. Serena arrived in seconds. She crouched, wiped the spill gently, offered a napkin, and whispered something reassuring. The woman nodded, a bit flustered, then smiled. Quentin watched the exchange. There it was again. Compassion and discontent coexisting in one uniform. Later, as Serena passed by, Quentin stopped her with a gentle question. "Can I ask you something?" She paused, surprised. "Of course. This your regular route?" She hesitated. "Not always. Depends on scheduling. Do you enjoy flying?" Serena tilted her head slightly. "Depends on the day." He smiled softly. Fair answer. She looked at him carefully. Her eyes lingered a moment longer than necessary. Then she moved on. Quentin sat back again. This flight was revealing more than any report ever could. The curtain between business and truth was thin. He just had to keep listening. The coffee smelled stronger at 37,000 feet. Or maybe it was just the silence. Somewhere near the galley, a pot gurgled to life. The scent of roasted beans drifted into the first-class cabin like a quiet reminder that this was still a normal flight. That somewhere beneath the layers of roles and uniforms, everyone was just trying to get through the night. Quentin Hale hadn't slept. He had tried. After the meal, he reclined his seat and closed his eyes, but his mind refused to settle. Every sentence he overheard earlier played on repeat. The tone, the tension. The part that stung most wasn't even what they said about him. It was the disconnection. He built VistaLux with a vision. Not just comfort or elegance, but fairness, equity. He had stood in front of journalists and proudly declared the company was diversity forward, employee first, a new standard for culture in the skies. Now, here he was, mid-air, listening to the very people who wore his brand whisper about invisibility and resentment. Maybe he had drifted too far into the corporate cloud cover. He rose from his seat quietly and made his way down the aisle, nodding politely at a sleepy passenger rubbing his eyes under a blanket. The lights in the cabin were dimmed for rest, a soft blue glow pulsing from above. As he reached the galley, he paused at the edge of the curtain. Voices again. Lexi was there, alone, stirring sugar into a cup of coffee. She didn't see him. Her posture was stiff, her shoulders curled slightly forward. She exhaled as if trying to reset herself. Then she took a sip, leaned back against the galley wall, and closed her eyes. For a moment, she looked completely undone. No performance, no armor. Quentin stepped back before she could see him. He returned to his seat and waited. A few minutes later, Serena came by, offering a fresh pot of coffee. Still awake, she asked, pouring gently. He smiled. "Too much on my mind." She gave a slight nod. "I get that. She seemed like she wanted to say more, but didn't. He watched her move down the row, topping off cups with quiet care. There was a grace to her presence. Professional, yes, but underneath, a sort of practiced emotional control, like someone who had spent years managing things no one else could see. Quentin stared out the window. The stars were clear tonight. A few city lights flickered far below. He wondered what his father would have thought of this moment. His son, alone in the sky, watching his own company from behind a curtain. He remembered something his mother used to say when she came home from the evening shift at the gate. You can't change what you won't look at. Back then, he thought she meant schedules or policies. Now he knew she meant people. The call light chimed from a seat across the aisle. Serena responded quickly. It was a middle-aged man in a wrinkled business shirt. He looked tired. "Apologies," he said, "but I can't get the Wi-Fi to work." Serena leaned in, asked a few questions, tried a quick fix, then promised to report it to tech services. She offered a voucher and even a second dessert from the galley. The man seemed satisfied. Quentin noticed how Lexi stayed in the background. She emerged only when necessary, taking trash, replacing napkins, responding quickly but distantly. At one point, an elderly woman 2 rows behind asked for ginger tea. Lexi brought hot water and the tea bag when the woman asked, "Can you steep it for me, dear?" My hands shake. Lexi hesitated, then nodded slowly and knelt down. Her face was unreadable, but she did it. And when the woman whispered, "Thank you," there was the briefest flicker of softness behind Lexi's eyes. Quentin saw it. He leaned back again and took a slow breath. It would be easy to categorize them. Serena, the kind-hearted one. Lexi, the bitter one. But life was rarely that simple. Maybe Lexi wasn't cold. Maybe she was tired. Maybe the system had trained her to protect herself. It wasn't about villains and victims. It was about people doing the best they could under pressure. And sometimes, people broke. He reached into the side pouch of his seat and pulled out the in-flight magazine. His face wasn't in it, thankfully, but there was a 2-page spread about VistaLux's Culture First initiative, Smilin' Crews, diverse teams, bullet points about inclusion. He studied the headline, "Everyone belongs at VistaLux." He closed the magazine. Later in the flight, when most passengers were dozing or wearing headphones, Serena passed by again. She paused. "Can I ask something, Mr. Hale?" He looked up. "Of course. You asked earlier if I enjoyed flying. I remember." She folded her hands in front of her, choosing her words carefully. "I do. Most days. But some days, it's hard to feel like what we do matters." Quentin's heart pulled a little. "What do you mean?" She glanced around, lowered her voice slightly. "I mean, it's a great airline, and it tries, but a lot of us still feel replaceable, like we're here to look good, smile, check boxes, not rise." He studied her expression. There was no anger, just honesty. He nodded slowly. "I appreciate you sharing that." She didn't seem to recognize who he was yet, or if she did, she was pretending not to. Either way, she gave a small smile and walked on. Quentin turned the reading light off and sat in the low glow of the cabin. This wasn't going to be easy. He had built the walls. Now he had to break them down. But first, he had to hear everything. Not just the complaints, the cracks, the confusion, the missed chances. He was starting to understand. People didn't just want a paycheck. They wanted dignity, respect, opportunity. It wasn't enough to feature them in a brochure. They wanted to be seen when the lights dimmed, when the passengers weren't looking, when the real work began. Quentin pressed his palm gently to the window and stared into the night. The answers weren't at the top. They were in the galley, and he was just getting started. Quentin Hale watched the cabin lights shift as the aircraft hummed along at cruising altitude. The gentle vibration beneath his seat reminded him that he was a long way from the boardroom. He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, studying the aisle. Each seat held a story he had never seen. He remembered the manifest he'd glimpsed before boarding. Q, Hale, First Class. But other names caught his eye as he scrolled through the in-flight magazine's staff profiles. Profiles lauding Lexi Durham and Serena Mahmood for outstanding customer service, for going above and beyond. But somehow those bright headlines felt hollow now, like trophies gathering dust. Quentin stood and made his way toward the galley curtain. He paused, wanting to remain unseen. He needed more context before revealing himself, before demanding answers. He needed to understand the faces behind the uniforms. He slipped past the curtain and entered the galley. Lexi was there, stacking empty dishes onto a tray. Serena sorted small packets of nuts and crackers onto a separate cart. Both turned in unison. Surprised at his sudden appearance, Quentin offered a polite smile. No grand announcement, no title. He held out his coffee cup. "I noticed mine ran dry," he said softly. "Mine to refill." Neither woman spoke for a moment. Lexi's eyes narrowed slightly. Was this some passenger joke, a prank, a test? Serena's expression was more neutral. She grabbed a fresh cup from the warmer and poured. "Thank you," Quentin said, watching them both. He didn't rush. He let tension hang in the recycled air as he surveyed their reactions. Lexi cleared her throat. "Your Q, Hale?" "Right. Daniel on 2B asked if that was your name. You didn't correct him." Quentin nodded. "I wanted to see how things work when I'm just a passenger." Lexi's face shifted, shock and confusion flickering. Serena's brow furrowed as she processed his words. They exchanged a glance. Lexi set down the dishes and leaned against the counter. Why, Lexi asked, voice low. "Why would you do that?" Quentin took a slow breath, because I realized I might be far removed from the day-to-day reality of this airline, and I needed to hear your unfiltered thoughts. Serena rested a hand on the counter next to Lexi. She spoke first. People don't just talk about executives behind their backs. They talk because they feel ignored. We felt like check boxes, like we were here to fill a quota. Lexi nodded, arms crossed. "I don't expect miracles, but I deserve the chance to grow. 3 years, 3 promotion cycles, and still nothing." Quentin held their gazes. No interruption. He wanted every word, every detail. Serena's voice softened as she added, "I love flying. I love helping people. But some days I feel like an actress, forced to smile on command." Lexi's jaw clenched. We learned to mask it, mask the frustration, mask the fatigue. The act becomes real, and then you forget you're acting. Quentin's heart tightened. He felt guilt, then an odd surge of hope. These admissions were the first honest currency he'd traded with his own company. "Thank you for telling me," he said quietly. "I know this must feel risky." Lexi's lips parted as if to speak, then closed. Serena's eyes softened. "We have to live with the consequences," Serena said, "even if it's just more empty words." Quentin held up his hand. "I promise I'm not here to punish anyone." I'm here to listen, and then act." Lexi's posture softened, shoulders dropping slightly. She let out a breath. What happened to all that talk about culture, about employee-first values I hear at every town hall? But when it comes to real decisions, raises, promotions, budgets, it's the same faces in the same seats. He nodded. That needs to change. It will change. Lexi glanced at Serena, then back at Quentin. Will it really, or will we just get another feel-good survey? Quentin looked each woman in the eye. I won't ask you to trust me blindly, but I will invite you both to a confidential session back at HQ once we land. I want your input. Serena's lips curved into a small, cautious smile. You're serious? He nodded firmly. I'm serious. Lexi uncrossed her arms. Fine, but know this. If you walk back on your word, I won't be the only one who remembers. Quentin offered his hand. Deal. Lexi stared at it a moment, then shook it. Serena did the same. As he turned to leave, he paused at the curtain. One last look. One silent promise. Change was coming. He returned to seat 2A, heart pounding. He let out a slow breath as he slid back into his seat. The cabin felt different, now alive with possibility and a fraught tension. He studied the passengers, the staff, the faint glow of reading lights. It was more than observations now. It was a mission. As the hours passed, he leaned into the in-flight magazine again. This time he read profiles with new eyes, Lexi's feature on leadership training, Serena's notes on language support programs. He made mental notes of every mention, every omission. He thought of his parents, of the ground crew workers in the frigid hangars, and his mother standing firm at her gate desk. They had taught him to see people, not processes. And now, he vowed, he would correct the course, not with speeches, but with results. The flight progressed smoothly, no turbulence. A few passengers asked for blankets, earplugs, extra headphones. The cabin crew fulfilled each request with practiced efficiency, and, now, with a glimmer of recognition that their voices had been heard. Quentin wondered what Lexi and Serena would tell him at the confidential meeting. He imagined their lists of grievances, their hopes, their dreams for VistaLux. He imagined an airline built not on PR but on lived experience, not on polished brochures but on everyday respect. He would see to it. As sleep finally beckoned, he leaned back and closed his eyes. He pictured the meeting room in New York, a round table, confidential notes, honest dialogue. He pictured Lexi and Serena, no longer masks of polite professionalism, but partners in shaping the future. He drifted off, a quiet resolve in his chest. Change was not a speech or a slogan, it was a promise, one he intended to keep. The cabin lights brightened once more as the seatbelt sign turned off for meal service. A soft chime echoed, and Lexi Durham appeared first, pushing a sleek trolley laden with polished silver trays and linen napkins. Her movements were practiced, efficient, every gesture measured. She offered the menus with a polite smile. Quentin Hale reached for the menu, and as their eyes met for an instant, he saw something in Lexi's gaze, an amalgam of professionalism and weary caution. He studied the choices: seared duck breast with cherry gas streak, lemon risotto with asparagus, a vegan mushroom ragu that promised richness beyond expectation. He remembered the rumor about the mushroom ragu being a test of culinary ambition, a dish introduced after a suggestion from his own head chef. He traced his finger along the menu's fine print and then looked up. "What do you recommend?" he asked Lexi quietly. She blinked, surprised by the question. Most first-class passengers knew exactly what they wanted or deferred to premium wine suggestions. Lexi paused, then leaned in a fraction. "The duck breast is popular," she said, "but if you're looking for something lighter, the risotto is very good." Quentin nodded. "I'll have the risotto. Please." Lexi recorded the order with a courteous nod and moved on. A few seats down, Serena Mahmood emerged with a gentle presence, offering a selection of wines to another passenger. After finishing with that section, she looked in Quentin's direction and made her way back. "Chardonnay or Merlot?" she asked. He hesitated. "Chardonnay, please." "Thank you." She served the wine and stepped back, her expression kind. When she passed another passenger in economy, her smile remained patient and warm. Quentin watched the contrast. Two women in the same uniform, same training, same mission, and yet their experiences felt worlds apart. Lexi returned with his plate. The risotto was creamy, flecked with bright green asparagus and a drizzle of truffle oil. He inhaled the aroma before taking his first bite. It was comfort in a dish earthy, balanced, refined. He ate slowly, letting the flavors settle. Around him, the cabin was quieter now. Some passengers were working on laptops. Others had dropped their seats back and fastened sleep masks. A few watched the in-flight map glow on seatback screens. Quentin looked up as Lexi moved past him. She paused, checking on a passenger who had requested an extra pillow. She knelt, secured the pillow behind the passenger's head, adjusted the blanket, then rose and continued her route. He realized how natural her care looked. Yet earlier, whispers told a different story. After finishing most of his meal, Quentin set down his fork. He waited until Lexi was free again. "May I ask you something else?" he said. She paused, then nodded, folding her hands in front of her. "Is this shift typical, I mean? Do you feel supported during meal service on a flight like this?" Lexi's lips pressed together. She considered him for a moment and then spoke softly. "It's easier on a flight like this," she admitted. "Fewer passengers, more time, better galley support. On a full flight, the pressure is intense. We rush, we juggle, and sometimes corners get cut." He looked at her, giving her the space to continue. "It's not that we don't want to provide the best service," Lexi said. "We do. But we're human. We get fatigued. We get overlooked. And then we're reminded by corporate at every turn that the show must go on." Quentin absorbed her words. He thought about the glossy emails he sent out to staff praising their performance metrics. He pictured the stock images in the intranet newsletter, diverse teams laughing, signing documents, posing in first class. He realized those images didn't reflect the long nights, the exhaustion, the weight Lexi carried. He nodded. "Thank you for being honest." She gave a small tilt of her head and moved on. Quentin waited a beat. Then he saw Serena return from the rear. She paused beside him. "How's everything tasting?" she asked. "It's excellent," he replied. "Better than I expected." Serena smiled. "The chef takes pride in quality. I'm glad you like it." He set his wine on the tray table and asked, "Do you find the menu gives you enough flexibility? Enough options to satisfy different needs?" Her eyes softened. "We get a variety of requests. Vegetarian, gluten-free, cultural preferences. The kitchen tries, but it's always a balancing act. Sometimes we run out of a dish. Sometimes dietary restrictions require extra effort. I end up spending a lot of time coordinating with the galley." He nodded. That sounds stressful." She shrugged gently. "We manage. We always do." As Cyrena turned to move on, Quentin called her back. "I appreciate your work. I really do." She met his gaze for a moment. "Thank you." Then she moved down the aisle, her footsteps measured. Quentin watched both women return to their stations. The tension in the cabin had shifted imperceptibly. Something had loosened, a tiny crack in the facade. He leaned back and closed his eyes for a moment. He thought about all the reports and meetings that had told him that VistaLux was an inclusive workplace, that morale was high, that employees felt valued. He realized how easy it was to believe your own narrative. He opened his eyes as an elderly couple 2 rows behind called for dessert. Lexi appeared promptly, offering a choice of fruit tart or chocolate mousse. She handed the tart to the woman and the mousse to the man. Then she paused. The woman looked at her dessert and sighed softly. "I was hoping for the apple pie," she said. Lexi's jaw tightened. "We're out of apple pie on this flight." "I'm sorry." The woman's face fell. Lexi looked at her, conflicted. She could blame the kitchen, she could apologize and move on, but instead she leaned in. "I can ask if they have one more back in the galley," she said quietly. The passenger nodded. Lexi rushed back. Serena followed shortly after with a fresh tart. The passenger's eyes lit up. She took a bite and smiled, offering Lexi a nod of gratitude. Quentin watched Lexi return. He saw in her expression a blend of relief and exhaustion. She met his eyes for a moment and offered a small, genuine smile. He realized then how much those small efforts mattered, how each choice to extend empathy cost something: time, energy, emotional labor. He set down his cutlery and reflected. The cabin was quiet once more. Only the low hum of night flight and the soft clinks of china. He let out a deep breath. This meal service was more than cuisine. It was a microcosm of the airline's culture, where real care clashed with systemic strain. Quentin stood and walked back to his seat. He took out a small notebook from his bag. On the first page he wrote, "Promote fluid communication between galley and kitchen. Increase menu flexibility. Empower flight attendants to make judgment calls without fear." He paused, then added, "Recognize emotional labor. Provide support for staff fatigue." He closed the notebook. Change would not happen overnight, but he had promise. And names now: Lexi Durham, Serena Mahmood. He slid into his seat and fastened his belt. The reading lights dimmed again. A few passengers dozed. The flight map glowed, showing the halfway point across the ocean. He leaned his head back. He felt a weight lift slightly, no longer silent in seat 2A. He had names, faces, honest assessments, and he would act. Quentin Hale shifted in his seat as the cabin lights dimmed and passengers settled in for the rest period. He closed his eyes for a moment, replaying the subtle interactions he had witnessed so far. Lexi's strained smile during meal service. Serena's careful coordination behind the scenes. The friction between efficiency and genuine care. He had learned a great deal already, yet he sensed the heart of the issue lay just beyond the next curtain. He rose quietly and walked toward the galley. The hum of the flight deck and the gentle thrum of the engines created a soft white noise. Every so often he passed a sleeping passenger, their breathing slow and steady. A man to his left wore noise-canceling headphones. A woman near the window clutched a travel pillow as if it were a lifeline. Sleep was their refuge. Quentin approached the galley curtain and paused. Beyond it lay the crew rest area and galley workspace where Lexi and Serena had confided in him before. He pulled the curtain aside and peeked in. Neither was there. He stepped through and found a small fold-down table and 2 jump seats. A kettle rested on a counter along with a selection of tea bags and instant coffee packets. He closed the curtain gently behind him. In that moment of stillness, the only sound was the faint hiss of the air vents. Quentin pressed his forehead against his palm, lost in thought. He realized how removed he had been from these moments, these whispers, from this very space. He settled into one of the jump seats and waited. A door near the aft opened. A flight attendant stepped out, stretching her back. It was Lexi. Her uniform sleeves were rolled up, and she had removed her name tag for rest. She paused when she saw the curtain moved. "Mr. Hale," she asked, voice low. "I was told to find you here." Quentin surprised himself by nodding. "Thank you for coming." Lexi slid into the other jump seat, folding her hands in her lap. Her hair was slightly mussed, a few strands escaping her pixie cut. She looked more human in that moment, tired perhaps, but determined. "I'm sorry to disturb you," she said softly. He shook his head. "I appreciate it." Before he could continue, Serena appeared in the doorway. She had pulled on a light cardigan over her uniform blouse. Her eyes were gentle, but there was a weariness there that made Quentin's heart tighten. "I thought I'd find you here," she said, closing the door behind her. Now the 3 of them sat in a circle that felt both intimate and precarious. The cabin beyond was quiet. A few aisle lights flickered as other attendants made their rounds. Quentin unclasped his hands. He wanted to be precise, yet he also wanted honesty. "Thank you both for coming," he began. "This is my first time really stepping into this part of the aircraft. Before today, I had reports and metrics. Now I have your stories. I need to hear more." Lexi exchanged a glance with Serena. Then she exhaled. "It's not just one thing," Lexi said. "It's everything, really. From scheduling to promotions to how we're treated when we ask for support." Quentin nodded. "Tell me more about scheduling." Lexi's eyes darkened. "Yesterday, I worked a 16-hour layover between Los Angeles and Tokyo. I barely had time to sleep. Then I got called for a reposition flight to Miami with no rest period. I'm grateful for the shift coverage, but it feels like corporate sees us as assets to be deployed, not people who need sleep." Serena leaned forward. "I've been on 15 straight flight legs in 8 days. I love flying, but I've never felt so exhausted. It's dangerous to be that tired at 35,000 feet. He felt his chest tighten. "That's unacceptable. We need a better rest policy." Lexi nodded. "That's one piece. But even when you put a rest policy in place, we feel hesitant to use it. If we call out sick or delay a flight for safety, it's coded as an unscheduled absence. It goes on our record." Quentin frowned. "I didn't know that. We will change that." Serena spoke up, voice quiet but firm. "There's also the matter of inclusivity. The diversity program looks great in marketing, but the leadership team is overwhelmingly homogeneous. I'm one of the few women of color in cabin crew, and promotion boards rarely include someone like me," Lexi added. "I've been second in command on flights for years. I've trained dozens of new hires. Yet, when there's an opening for lead flight instructor, it goes to someone with connections, a friend of a manager, or someone from a specific background." Quentin held their eyes. "You deserve better. I want the promotion process to be transparent. to include a diverse panel, to remove any bias. You both will help design that process." He paused. They absorbed the promise. Serena bit her lip. Lexi uncrossed her arms. Lexi took a breath. "Thank you, but sound bites and plans are one thing. We need accountability. How will you ensure this sticks?" He leaned forward. "I will bring in an external consultant to review our promotion data. We will publish the results to all staff and make recommendations public. If anyone bypasses the process, they will be disciplined." Serena nodded slowly. That level of transparency would mean a lot. Lexi's posture softened. "And what about feedback on safety training, mental health? We hardly have resources for any of that." Quentin reached into his pocket and pulled out a pen. He wrote a note on his pad. Establish a mental health support hotline. Conduct regular safety debrief sessions led by trained professionals. Budget for cross-department workshops. He looked up. "These are immediate priorities, and I will draft memos tonight. You two will see them when we land." Serena pressed her fingertips together. "It's more than just policies. It's culture. People have to feel safe speaking up, to know they aren't risking their careers." Lexi nodded. "We need an open channel, a council or committee to voice concerns, not just an anonymous form that disappears into a black hole." Quentin drew a circle in his notebook. "A staff advisory council. You both will serve as founding members. We will include representatives from mechanics, ground staff, pilots, cabin crew, and corporate. We will meet monthly and audit every policy." Lexi and Serena exchanged glances. They looked hopeful, cautious. Lexi spoke first. "If this happens, it could change everything." Serena added, "If you follow through." Quentin closed his eyes for a moment. "I will. You have my word." They sat in silence for a heartbeat. Then Lexi stood and stretched. Serena followed. Lexi offered her hand first, and Quentin shook it. Serena did the same. As the two women moved back toward the galley, Quentin lingered behind the curtain. He steadied himself against the wall and let out a slow breath. Behind that fabric lay real tension and real solutions. He had entered their world. Now he had to lead from it. He returned to his seat, notebook in hand. He scribbled a final note: review all policies by next board meeting, engage external consultant, launch advisory council. He closed his notebook. The cabin was gently humming. The soft glow of night lights painted shadows. He pressed his hand to his chest. He felt the flicker of responsibility, of hope. He was not just a man flying incognito. He was a leader challenged to rebuild trust. And it began here, behind the curtain, with truths whispered in confidence. Quentin Hale settled back into seat 2A as the cabin lights brightened for a brief service check. He felt the glow as a welcome respite from the dimmed blue that lulled most passengers toward sleep. He closed his eyes for a moment and allowed himself a single thought. I cannot return to New York unchanged. He opened his eyes and watched the flight attendants move with purpose through the first-class cabin. Lexi Durham checked seat belts. Serena Mahmoud offered blankets to those who stirred. Each action was precise, professional, almost graceful. Yet Quentin saw the weight behind their smiles. He reached into his jacket pocket and retrieved a small photograph. It was of his parents standing outside Terminal 4 at JFK. His father wore a windbreaker and work boots. His mother held a stack of boarding passes in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other. Quentin had grown up in their shadow. then built an airline that bore his name. But tonight, he realized how far removed he had become from their world. He closed the photo and placed it back in his pocket. He touched the seatbelt buckle in front of him. A silent reminder that he was bound to this journey both literally and figuratively. A gentle chime signaled a beverage service. Serena approached first with a tea trolley. She asked each passenger what they preferred. As she neared Quentin's seat, she offered chamomile, English breakfast, and green tea. Quentin chose green tea. The steaming cup arrived in a porcelain mug. He inhaled the aroma and took a slow sip. The warmth seeped through him, calming his racing thoughts. Serena lingered for a moment. Still thinking about our conversation earlier, she asked softly. He nodded. Every word you both shared matters. He paused. I've been reviewing notes nonstop. Her eyes showed relief. That means a lot. So many times change is just words. He gave a small, sincere smile. Not this time. Serena moved on, and Lexi soon swept through with a cart of cleaning wipes and headrest covers. She paused beside Quentin to replace his headrest pad with a fresh one. Thank you, he said, and she looked at him with curiosity. He added, I meant what I said in the galley. Lexi's eyes flickered as if trying to decide whether to believe him. She nodded once and continued her work. Quentin watched her walk away, noticing how she kept her back straight, yet never lost that hint of tension in her shoulders. He stretched his legs and glanced at his watch. They were over the Atlantic now, roughly halfway to Amsterdam. The time zone change would push the local arrival to the early morning, but he didn't mind. Sleep would come later. Quentin closed his eyes for a moment and remembered his mother's voice. Never assume you know what others endure, she had said, until you've worked their shift. He had never forgotten those words. Tonight, they echoed louder than ever. He drifted into a light doze, only to be awakened by a soft footstep beside him. He opened his eyes to see Serena again. I'm sorry to bother you, she whispered, but I wanted to share something else. He gestured to the seat beside him. Please, sit. She perched on the armrest, careful to keep her uniform neat. I was talking to ground staff earlier this week. They handle baggage loading overnight. There's a shortage of crew, so they're pulling people in from other hubs. They're exhausted, and the problem trickles up. Late departures, rush service, frustrated passengers. He absorbed her words. That sounds like a systemic issue. He watched her profile in the soft cabin light. Thank you for telling me. She nodded. You're listening. That's more than anyone else has done. He let that sink in. Then he heard the sound of Lexi calling Serena's name from the galley. Serena stood and whispered, Thank you. She slipped away and disappeared behind the curtain. Quentin exhaled deeply. The path forward was clearer now. It wasn't enough to fix cabin staffing or promotion processes. He had to address the entire ecosystem, from ground crews to corporate decks. Just then, the seatbelt sign flicked on. A turbulence warning. The engines stuttered slightly, and the cabin lights shifted to a flickering white. Passengers held onto armrests. A steward reassured someone in economy. Overhead, bins rattled. Not long after, the sign went off and the announcement came through the speakers. The captain's calm voice noted some light chop ahead, but nothing to worry about. Quentin felt the shift jolt through him. It reminded him that stability could crumble at any moment. He thought of Lexi and Serena working through such turbulence countless times, keeping composure, smiling, protecting passengers. He tapped his notebook and wrote, "Conduct airline-wide fatigue analysis. Address ground crew shortages. Revise duty scheduling for all departments." He put the notebook away and leaned back. When he opened his eyes, he saw Lexi at the far end of the cabin. She stood by the curtain, arms crossed, speaking quietly into a handheld radio. Her expression was taut. Quentin wondered what she was saying. Was it an update on the turbulence, a call for assistance? He would never know. He realized how often he overlooked those radio calls in board meetings, the real-time crisis management that defined frontline work. He closed his eyes again and drifted for an hour. When he awoke, the cabin was silent but for the soft hum of the engines and the occasional beep of navigational instruments. The reading lights were on. Some passengers typed on laptops. Others quietly read books. Lexi and Serena emerged together, sharing a quick word. Serena rested a hand on Lexi's shoulder. Then they both walked toward the galley, leaving Quentin alone in the aisle. He watched them disappear. Their unity struck him. Despite frustrations, they supported each other. Alliance formed in shared struggle. He realized he needed more than conversations. He needed to foster community, a council, yes, but also mentorship programs, peer support networks. He retrieved his pen again and added to his notes, "Launch Peer Mentorship Program. Recognize crew achievements publicly, integrate ground and cabin training sessions." He paused. The list was growing, ambitious, sweeping, yet each item was necessary. Quentin closed his notebook and leaned his head back, allowing exhaustion to wash over him. But sleep did not come easy. His mind buzzed with plans, ideas, promises. He blinked and saw the in-flight map. They were nearing European airspace, 10 degrees west. The sun would rise soon. He thought of the board meeting in a few days, the external consultant's report, the lobby for policy reform, the advisory council he would convene. He thought of Lexi and Serena, of every crew member unseen by executives, of his parents and their pride in a job done well. He closed his eyes and murmured silently, "Thank you. Thank you for speaking up. Thank you for staying strong." He made a silent vow that he would not let them down. Quentin Hale felt a knot tighten in his stomach as the cabin lights brightened for the in-flight snack service. The gentle hum of conversation rose around him. Passengers stretched, some reaching for phone chargers, others scanning emails on seatback screens. Outside the oval windows, a pale sliver of moon glowed against the inky sky. He closed his eyes and recalled Lexi Durham's words from earlier. If he really wanted to know, he'd get on a flight and listen. Tonight he had listened. Now it was time to step out from behind the curtain. Quentin slipped out of his seat and walked down the aisle. His heart thudded softly in his chest. Lexi and Serena had agreed to meet him after the cabin dimmed. He remembered the pact he had made with them when they shook his hand back in the galley. He would not break his word. As he reached the galley curtain, he found Lexi and Serena waiting side by side. Both wore their uniforms still pristine. Lexi's face was pale under the soft cabin lights. Serena's eyes glinted with resolve. Quentin paused in the entrance. He adjusted his cap, revealing just enough of his face so they could recognize him. "I promised I would tell you the truth," he said quietly. "This is me." Lexi's mouth dropped open. Serena's hand went to her chest. Neither moved for a moment. Then Lexi's voice broke the silence. "You're Quentin Hale." Her tone was a mixture of disbelief and a tremor that betrayed her emotions. The man who built VistaLux? He nodded. Yes, it's me. Lexi ran a hand through her hair. We thought it might be you, but we didn't want to believe it. Serena swallowed. You lied. You watched us without telling us who you were. He held their gazes. I did. I needed to hear your unfiltered truth. I needed to know what it felt like to be one of you, not the name on the board. Lexi crossed her arms. Her expression was fierce. So, you turned us into lab rats? I turned myself into one. Quentin replied calmly. This was not a stunt or an ego trip. It was a necessity. I realize now how disconnected I had become. Serena took a breath. You heard us vent about token hires, promotion gaps, exhaustion. You heard us question every promise your company made. I heard you, he said, and I believe you. Lexi's eyes narrowed. Believe us, you have a private jet, an executive team, $1 million annual retreat budget. We hear your speeches about culture, but then we see you from afar and feel like we're the ones who disappear into brochures. Quentin's shoulders sagged. I know, and that ends now. Lexi's voice softened. What are you going to do? You asked for our stories. Now tell us how you will change them. He stepped forward and rested both hands on the galley counter. The stainless steel was cool beneath his fingertips. First, he said, I will remove all barriers to fair promotion. We will revise the review process with external oversight. All staff will see the criteria, the data, and the results. No more backroom decisions. Serena nodded slowly. That would be a start. Second, Quentin continued, I will overhaul the scheduling system. Rest periods will be guaranteed, not optional. We will eliminate punitive codes for unscheduled absences related to safety or fatigue. Lexi uncrossed her arms and exhaled. People will actually have time to rest. They will, he confirmed. I will allocate additional resources to cover shifts so no one is punished for prioritizing safety, Serena added. What about mental health counseling support? Quentin reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his notebook. He flipped to a blank page and wrote Mental Health Support Hotline, dedicated counseling budget, peer mentorship network, mentioned support groups. He showed them the list. I will fund a comprehensive mental health program. Counselors available 24/7. Peer network so no one faces this alone. Lexi glanced at the list. Her shoulders relaxed for the first time that evening. Okay, that's real. Quentin nodded, then continued. Finally, I want you both to be founding members of a staff advisory council. You will represent cabin crew, while others represent ground staff, pilots, mechanics, corporate. We will meet monthly, publish meeting minutes, and hold leadership accountable. Serena's eyes glimmered. A real council with real impact. Yes, he said firmly. No more siloed surveys. We will act on feedback publicly and promptly. Lexi took a deep breath and let it out. You make it sound so simple. Quentin managed a small smile. Simple, but not easy. I will need your help to keep me honest. Serena stepped closer. We will help, but we will hold you to it. He extended his hand to Lexi again. Deal. Lexi regarded his hand for a heartbeat, then shook it. Serena followed suit. As they released hands, the overhead chime signaled another service. Lexi and Serena moved back behind the curtain, unified by the promise they had extracted. Quentin paused at the threshold. He watched them shoulder to shoulder, two women who had spoken truth to power. He felt a surge of gratitude and responsibility. He returned to seat 2A and sat down, heart pounding. The cabin felt lighter now, as if honesty itself had reduced the weight in the air. He opened his notebook again. He wrote confirm meeting date for advisory council, draft memo on promotion policy, publish safety and rest guidelines, establish mental health program. He paused and added one more note. Remember tonight. Tonight had changed everything. Hours later, as the first rays of dawn tinted the horizon, the captain announced the approach into Amsterdam. Passengers stirred, stretching arms, gathering belongings. The gentle clatter of overhead bins moving into place echoed through the cabin. Lexi passed Quentin's row, offering a blanket retrieval. She met his eyes and gave a small, genuine smile. No performance, no mask. Serena followed, offering a refreshing towel. She too paused, her gaze warm with cautious optimism. Quentin pressed his palm to his heart and whispered silently, "Thank you." Then he allowed himself the smallest smile. He had heard the truth. He had made promises. Now he would return to New York to fulfill them. As the plane touched down smoothly, he felt the gravity of responsibility settle deep within him. But he also felt hope. Change was no longer a concept. It was a commitment written in whispered words behind the curtain at 37,000 feet. Quentin Hale watched the sunrise paint the sky in pastel hues as the Airbus descended toward Amsterdam Schiphol Airport. The fields below looked like patchwork quilts in dawn light. He felt the restless energy building as wheels touched the tarmac. Today, he would follow through on the promise he made behind the galley curtain. Today, he would begin real change. The cabin crew began preparations for disembarkation. Lexi Durham and Serena Mahmood moved through first class with calm professionalism, directing remaining passengers toward the exit. Lexi offered a warm smile to an elderly couple collecting their coats. Serena assisted a business traveler with his briefcase, checking one last time that luggage bins were secure. Quentin rose from seat 2A and gathered his belongings. His duffel bag felt heavier than when he boarded. It carried not only his laptop and notebook, but also the weight of the commitments he had made. He stepped into the aisle and watched Lexi at the front of the cabin. She paused and looked back at him. Their eyes met, and she offered a small nod. He nodded back in gratitude. As soon as the door opened, Quentin departed ahead of most passengers. He navigated the jet bridge and emerged into the crisp morning air of the terminal. He wanted to move quickly to the private lounge downstairs where he had arranged a confidential meeting. But first he lingered in the main concourse, watching families and business travelers reunite and continue journeys. He observed baggage handlers tagging suitcases, pilots in crisp uniforms walking with purpose, ground staff escorting passengers in wheelchairs. His entire airline ecosystem pulsed with life around him. Quentin found his way to the private lounge. It was quiet, with soft benches and a small coffee station. He checked his watch. Lexi and Serena were due in 15 minutes. He brewed a cup of strong coffee and poured it into a paper cup. As he sipped, he reviewed his notes one last time. He had drafted an agenda. He had clear objectives. But, most important, he reminded himself to listen again. He looked up when the door opened. Lexi entered first, her uniform tailored yet comfortable. She wore a light cardigan over her blouse. Her expression was cautious. A moment later, Serena arrived. Her hair was neatly tied back, and she carried a small notebook of her own. They both looked around and then spotted him. "Good morning," Quentin said, standing to greet them. His voice was warm and unassuming. Lexi shifted slightly, folding her arms. "Good morning." Serena offered a gentle nod. "Thank you for inviting us." Quentin gestured to the seating area. "Please sit wherever you like." They chose opposite seats, creating a small triangle of chairs. Quentin sat facing them. He placed his coffee on a side table and opened his notebook. "I appreciate you making time on your day off to come here," he began. "I want this to be an honest conversation. No slides, no executives observing, just us." Lexi uncrossed her arms and leaned forward. "We appreciate that." Serena flipped open her notebook. "We made some notes." Quentin smiled. "I saw the notes you wrote on the plane." Lexi folded her hands. "Those were spontaneous. I took more notes after I went to sleep and thought about what matters most." Serena added, "We not only want to talk about what needs fixing, but also what's working well. There are things we like about working for VistaLux." Quentin nodded. "I want to start with hearing your perspectives. Lexi, would you like to begin?" Lexi took a breath. Her eyes met Quentin's. "What works is that we have a strong brand. Passengers love the service. We get fewer complaints than most airlines. The equipment is modern. Meals are good. In first class, we have room and resources to provide excellent service. That makes us proud." He nodded. "That was my vision. Quality in every detail." She continued. "But the biggest problem is consistency of leadership support. Every time an initiative starts, it fades after a few months. New managers bring new priorities. People like me feel uncertain. We fear speaking up because next month someone else will be in charge and we have to start over." Quentin scribbled quick notes. "Leadership consistency. Sustained commitment. Not one-off programs." She nodded. "Exactly." Serena leaned forward. "Another strength is that people do care. I have seen my colleagues help strangers in crisis. We get real praise from travelers, but many of us leave the airline after a few years because the career path doesn't match our ambitions." Quentin set his coffee down. "Tell me more about career paths." Serena tilted her head. "I applied for a flight safety instructor position. I completed the required training and received strong evaluations. When I interviewed, I was told I was qualified. Then management chose someone else because he had worked in corporate for a season. I felt like my frontline expertise didn't count." Lexi frowned. "That happens more often than you know. It sends the message that corporate experience matters more than cabin experience. That someone with a desk job deserves to lead those of us on the plane." Quentin raised his hand. "I understand. I created a promotion rubric that values both operational and leadership skills, but somehow it hasn't been applied consistently. That ends now. We will revise the rubric with your input, and then every candidate's application will be reviewed transparently." Lexi's shoulders eased. She exhaled softly. That would be huge. He flipped a page in his notebook. "Next item. Rest and fatigue." "Serena, could you explain the issues you face most days?" Serena nodded. "Flights cross time zones, layovers are short, we often don't get proper rest. If we request a rest period, it can be marked as fatigue absence, which impacts our performance record. We feel punished for safeguarding safety." Quentin tapped his pen. "So, the policy is counterproductive. We will revise the fatigue policy to protect records for safety-related absences. I will work with HR to retrofit the system to record such events as non-punitive." Serena's eyes softened. That would encourage people to report issues before they become dangerous. He smiled. Exactly. Safety first must be more than a slogan. They went through each topic: mental health, diversity in leadership, communication channels, resource allocation. Quentin listened without interruption, offered clarifying questions, and made immediate commitments. After 45 minutes, Lexi spoke. "I know this is a lot. We really appreciate it. But I want you to know that if this falls apart, the disappointment will be deeper than the satisfaction." Quentin met her gaze. "I understand completely. I will present this action plan at the next board meeting. I will ask for your presence, Lexi and Serena, as witnesses. I will hold every executive accountable." Serena closed her notebook. That is all we needed to hear. Quentin smiled broadly. "Thank you. I want to end by asking how I can support you personally in your careers." Lexi thought for a moment. "A mentor program connecting cabin crew with senior leadership who have frontline backgrounds. Someone I can reach out to?" Quentin nodded. "Consider it done," Serena added. "And more multilingual training sessions for crew. Some of us speak 3 or 4 languages. It would help passengers and open career doors." Quentin wrote those down. "I will make that a priority." They rose together, a sense of relief and cautious optimism in the air. Lexi extended her hand, and Quentin shook it firmly. Serena hugged him briefly. They departed the lounge, stepping into the corridor with heads held higher than before. Quentin remained alone for a moment. He reflected on the return flight. He had transformed whispers of frustration into an action plan. He had seen the faces behind the uniforms and honored their voices. He finished his coffee and left the lounge, ready to board the flight home. As he walked toward the gate, he felt a sense of purpose renewed. The real journey was only beginning. Quentin Hale stepped off the tram at headquarters with a quiet determination. The early morning sun glinted off the glass facade of VistaLux Airlines' New York office complex. He straightened his tie and inhaled deeply. Today, the board would hear a plan born at 35,000 feet. A plan shaped by Lexi and Serena, by the voices he had heard in the galley. It was time to move beyond promises into action. Inside the lobby, receptionists greeted him with smiles and nods. The hum of conversation in the atrium felt routine, like any other Monday. He made his way to the executive elevator and pressed the button for the top floor. He reviewed his notes one final time. 5 key initiatives, clear timelines, assigned owners, measurable outcomes. The doors opened to a long corridor lined with meeting rooms. He paused at room A23, the boardroom. He looked at his reflection in the frosted glass nameplate Board of Directors conference room. Then he pushed the door open. Veteran executives sat around a gleaming mahogany table. Pilots in crisp uniforms, finance directors in tailored suits, HR leaders with neat portfolios, legal counsel quietly checking mobile devices. Their eyes turned to Quentin. He offered a nod. "Good morning, everyone." Chairwoman Evelyn Morgan rose and smiled. "Good morning. Quentin, please begin." He advanced to the head of the table and connected his laptop to the screen. The slide deck loaded bold title, VistaLux Airlines, A New Path Forward. He took a breath. "Thank you all for joining today. Over the past week, I flew undercover on Flight VL203. I listened to our crew. I saw firsthand the challenges we face. I heard from Lexi Durham and Serena Mahmood. They've witnessed them too. A ripple of surprise passed through the room. Some eyebrows arched. A few exchanged glances. Outside the glass walls, the city marched on, unaware of the reckoning within. He clicked to the next slide. Employee morale survey results versus observed feedback. Our surveys show 85% employee satisfaction. Yet anonymous comments and personal accounts reveal a different reality. He pointed to a chart showing declining morale in cabin crew. We have a disconnect between perception and reality. We must bridge this gap. He moved forward through slides detailing the 5 initiatives. 1. Promotion transparency. Objective: revise promotion process with external oversight. Timeline completed by Q4. Owner HR Director. He explained the new rubric co-designed with Lexi and Serena, the external consultant's role, and the plan to publish promotion data company-wide. 2. Rest and fatigue. Reform objective: guarantee rest periods and eliminate punitive fatigue codes. Timeline: Phase 1 by next month. Owner Operations Head. He described the new scheduling software, the safety-first coding for absences, and the additional reserve crew budget. 3. Mental health support. Objective launch: 24/7 counseling, hotline, and peer mentorship. Timeline pilot program in 4 hubs by Q3. Owner, Wellness Director. He shared a quote from Serena, knowing there's someone to talk to can make all the difference. A soft nod from the HR team acknowledged the impact. 4. Staff Advisory Council. Objective: establish a council representing all departments. Timeline: first meeting next week. Owner, Quentin Hale. He named Lexi and Serena as founding cabin crew representatives, along with ground staff and pilot council members. 5. Diversity in leadership. Objective: ensure executive and management teams reflect frontline diversity. Timeline: revised hiring targets by year-end. Owner, Diversity Officer. He introduced new guidelines for diverse slates in leadership recruitment and a mentorship pipeline for high-potential crew. He advanced to a slide titled Accountability and Metrics. Under it, a list board reviews, monthly progress reports, quarterly town halls, anonymous feedback channels. He looked around the table. Every initiative has an owner, a deadline, and key performance indicators. We will track progress publicly. Any slippage will be reviewed at the next board meeting. Silence followed. Then Chairwoman Morgan leaned forward. Quentin, this is ambitious. He nodded. This is only the start. Sustainable culture change requires bold action and transparency. The CFO, Marcus Lee, cleared his throat. This will require reallocation of budget. Some line items will shrink executive retreats. Certain marketing campaigns will need to calculate the impact. Quentin met his gaze. Investing in our people will yield returns in service quality, brand loyalty, and ultimately profitability. If we fail to act, the cost in turnover, safety risks, and reputation could be far greater. Marcus paused, then nodded slowly. Understood. A veteran pilot, Captain Elena Torres, spoke next. Safety has always been our priority. Reform and fatigue policy is overdue, but we must ensure we have the staff to cover the gaps. Flight ops will need support. Quentin tapped the slide. That is why we are increasing reserve crew budgets and cross-training ground staff. We will collaborate closely with operations to ensure coverage. Captain Torres nodded. One by one, each executive asked clarifying questions and voiced support or concerns. Quentin answered calmly, acknowledging risks but reinforcing his commitment. After nearly 2 hours, Chairwoman Morgan looked around the room. This is a comprehensive plan. Thank you. Quentin, for your leadership. She tapped her pen. All in favor of adopting these initiatives as our strategic priorities for the coming year, hands went up around the table. Consensus was unanimous. Quentin allowed himself a small smile. A round of applause followed. He felt relief, but it was tempered by the reality that implementation would be the true test. After the meeting, Quentin retreated to his office quarters on the executive floor. He pressed a button on his desk phone. Lexi, it's Quentin. The board has approved our initiatives. I'm scheduling our first council meeting for next Wednesday. Are you available? A pause, then Lexi's voice. Yes, thank you for making this happen. He hung up and dialed Serena. We're on. Let's change this airline. He ended the call and looked out at the Manhattan skyline. The city sparkled, alive with possibility. He thought of the journey he'd taken from the anonymity of seat 2A to this moment of collective commitment. He opened his notebook one final time. On a fresh page he wrote Launch Council, communicate changes to staff, monitor KPIs weekly, celebrate early wins, stay accountable. Quentin closed the book and tapped the pen against it. He felt the gravity of leadership anew. His airline's future rested on these reforms, but he no longer felt isolated in an executive tower. He was joined by Lexi, Serena, and countless voices ready to shape a better VistaLux. He stood and walked to the window. He whispered, "This is for you," thinking of his parents and the young Lexi and Serena who had breathed life into his vision. The restructure was underway, and this time it would stick. Quentin Hale arrived at the runway observation deck to watch the departure of VistaLux Flight VL204 to Singapore. The morning sun glinted off the sleek fuselages lined up along the tarmac. He always found solace in these moments of quiet reflection before the day's storms. Today felt different. Today he sensed a change in the air. He stepped back inside headquarters, greeted by the low hum of phones and the murmur of colleagues discussing early morning operations. He made his way to the Staff Advisory Council meeting room. Lexi Durham and Serena Mahmood were already seated at the round table. They both looked energized, their uniforms crisp and eyes bright. Quentin offered a nod of greeting. "Good morning." They returned nods with genuine smiles. He took a seat between them. On the table lay printed calendars, agenda packets, and nameplates representing different departments: mechanics, ground staff, pilots, corporate, and cabin crew. The council was in action. "I'm grateful to see you both here," Quentin began. "Today marks our first collective step forward." Lexi adjusted her seat. "We have a lot to cover." Serena opened the agenda. First item is progress on promotion transparency. Quentin tapped his pen. "We launched the revised rubric 2 weeks ago. HR Director Grace Liu can share early data." Grace, seated opposite, cleared her throat. "Since implementation, we have processed 12 promotion requests. Each application was reviewed by a diverse panel. 8 were approved. We published anonymized results to all staff yesterday." Lexi leaned forward. "Anonymized results." Grace nodded. "Positions, criteria, and outcomes. No personal identifiers, but employees can see how decisions were made." Serena smiled. "That's transparency in action," Grace added. "We received positive feedback from mid-level staff. They appreciate the clarity." She paused. "Some managers expressed concerns that revealing data might discourage applications," Quentin replied. Transparency is non-negotiable. We will address concerns through training and emphasize fairness as our core value." Lexi tapped her fingers on the table. "Next, we should discuss rest and fatigue reforms." Serena pointed to the report. Operations Head Michael Clark has implemented new scheduling software. We now guarantee a minimum rest period of 10 hours between flight legs. Fatigue-related absences are coded separately without penalty. Michael, seated nearby, added, "Since launch, we've seen a 20% drop in unscheduled absences. Safety incidents related to fatigue have decreased by 15%. Quentin nodded. "Excellent progress. We will continue monitoring and adapt as needed." The council members murmured approval. Even the pilot representative, Captain Elena Torres, offered a thumbs up. Serena took the floor. "Now, I want to discuss mental health support." Quentin motioned to Wellness Director Olivia Patel. "Olivia has updates." Olivia cleared her throat. "Our 24/7 counseling hotline went live last week. We have 10 trained counselors and peer mentors representing each region. In the first 5 days, we handled 28 calls. Feedback indicates staff appreciate anonymity and immediacy." Lexi smiled. "I used the hotline once. It made a real difference." Olivia continued. "We are scheduling mental health workshops at major hubs next month. Flight crew, ground staff, and corporate are all invited." Serena added, "It feels good to know support is available." Quentin recognized that moment. The shift from skepticism to belief was the real wind beneath new initiatives. The council moved on to diversity and leadership. Diversity Officer Marcus Eng stood and addressed the group. We set new diversity targets for senior roles. In the last promotion cycle, 2 of our 5 executive hires were women of color. Our pipeline programs are mentoring high-potential employees from underrepresented backgrounds. Lexi nodded approvingly. "It is improving. But we need to sustain momentum." Marcus replied, "Absolutely. We will track year over year and launch leadership development cohorts next quarter." A hub manager raised a question about budget implications. "Will this affect funding for other programs?" Quentin spoke up. "We reallocated discretionary budgets earlier to prioritize frontline support. We will continue to evaluate investments based on impact rather than tradition." That prompted a round of thoughtful nods. The council embraced the principle of purposeful investment. Finally, Quentin turned to Lexi and Serena. "I want to invite both of you to co-chair a subcommittee on cabin crew development. Lexi, you will lead skill enhancement programs. Serena, you will oversee cultural competency and language training." Lexi swallowed and then nodded. "Thank you. I will do my best." Serena beamed. "I look forward to it," Quentin added, "and I will personally attend your first subcommittee meeting to show my support." The room filled with quiet applause. The council members sensed a genuine partnership between leadership and frontline staff. As the meeting adjourned, Lexi and Serena walked out with Quentin. In the corridor, their steps felt lighter. Lexi spoke first. "I woke up this morning feeling hopeful." Serena nodded. "Me too. It is rare to see change happen this quickly." Quentin grinned. "This is only the beginning." They parted ways at the elevator, each returning to daily duties with renewed purpose. Later that day, Quentin visited the crew training center. He found Lexi leading a workshop on leadership skills. She addressed a room of new flight attendants, sharing best practices on service, safety, and career growth. Quentin watched from the back, pride swelling nearby. Serena conducted a language training session for ground staff transitioning to cabin roles. She practiced simple phrases in Spanish, French, and Mandarin. Laughter bubbled as participants stuttered through greetings and responses. He walked over and quietly greeted Serena. "You've created a warm environment." She looked up, surprised, then smiled. "Thank you for giving me the chance." He nodded. "You earned it." Across the hall, ground crew watched a recorded town hall meeting where employees saw Lexi and Serena speak candidly about change at HI altitude. Viewers responded with comments praising transparency. Quentin reflected on the transformation. Less than a month ago, he had sat behind a curtain, listening in silence. Now, Lexi and Serena led impactful programs. He tapped his watch and headed toward HR to review the latest dashboard metrics. Turnover rates were down, safety incidents were down, engagement scores were rising. He opened his laptop and drafted an update to send company-wide. He wrote VistaLux team. "We have taken bold steps toward a more inclusive, supportive, and transparent culture. Thank you to the Staff Advisory Council and all who have contributed. Together, we are redefining excellence at 35,000 feet. Let's keep the winds of change flowing strong." He paused, then hit send. As the email went out, he sensed smiles lighting up screens across the company. The winds were indeed new, and they carried promise. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes for a moment. The journey would continue. Challenges remained. But for the first time in years, he felt certain of one thing: VistaLux Airlines would soar higher than ever before. Nearly a year had passed since Quentin Hale first stepped into seat 2A under a false name. Today, he climbed the jet bridge of VistaLux Flight VL203 bound for Sydney with a sense of familiarity and renewed purpose. The late afternoon sun slanted through the terminal windows, casting long shadows on the floor. He paused at the cabin door, took a deep breath, and smiled. This time he wore a crisp blazer over a neat dress shirt. No hoodie, no cap. He greeted the gate agent with a genuine nod. She scanned his pass and smiled. No recognition flickered in her eyes, but there was warmth. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Hale," she said. "Thank you," he replied, stepping inside. The first-class cabin was bright and welcoming. As he walked down the aisle, he spotted Lexi Durham adjusting a stewardess bag near the galley door. Her hair was neatly styled, and she wore a radiant expression. Serena Mahmood moved between rows, handing out amenity kits to awaiting passengers in business class. Quentin paused beside Lexi. "Good afternoon," he said. Lexi turned, and surprise flickered in her eyes. She straightened, her posture crisp and professional. "Mr. Hale," she said with a bright smile. "Welcome back." He offered a small nod. "Thank you for your work today." She nodded in return and then pointed him to seat 2A. He slid into the familiar seat and placed his briefcase in the overhead bin. The cabin lights dimmed to a soft glow. Through the window, he saw the tarmac slowly retreating. He leaned back and exhaled. He had flown many times since that first red-eye, but never with such a calm heart. Moments later, Serena delivered a pre-departure drink. She offered Perrier water or a cold-pressed juice. "I'll have the juice, please," he said. She placed the glass on his tray table. Her eyes met his for a second, and she smiled. "Thank you." "Sir," she said. He nodded. "I appreciate everything you're doing." She paused as if to speak, then continued down the aisle. He watched her move, confident, and connected to her purpose. As the plane taxied, he opened his notebook, but the pages were already full of words, plans, and promises. He flipped to the last page and read the final note he wrote after the board meeting. Launch council, communicate changes to staff, monitor KPIs weekly, celebrate early wins, stay accountable. He smiled. They had not only stayed on track, but had built momentum. The seatbelt sign clicked off. The captain's voice welcomed everyone aboard. The engines surged, and the aircraft leapt into the sky. Quentin closed his notebook. He let the engine hum and the breeze of recycled air settle around him. He looked around the cabin. Instead of the tension and silence he once saw, he now saw a crew at ease. Passengers were chatting softly, smiling, settling into their flights. He noticed Lexi greeting a passenger in 1B by name. She handed him a menu, offered wine recommendations, and shared a light laugh with genuine warmth. The passenger beamed, a few rows back. Serena was discussing language options with an international family. She spoke in 3 languages, helping each traveler feel at home on the flight. Quentin felt a swell of pride. It wasn't just the service or the accolades, it was the trust. The crew no longer masked frustration. They breathed authenticity. He reached into the seat pocket for the in-flight magazine. On the cover was a feature titled Voices at 35,000 Feet, with a photo of Lexi and Serena standing together in a galley. An excerpt read, "My job is more than a uniform. It's my career, my community, my family." He turned the pages and read the article. It detailed the new advisory council, the transparent promotion data, the revamped safety policies, and the mental health hotline. It included quotes from Lexi, Serena, and numerous other employees. He closed the magazine. The pages were more than words on glossy paper. They represented change in motion. A flight attendant approached with the dinner trolley. Quentin ordered the seared barramundi. It arrived flawlessly plated and piping hot. As he took his first bite, Lexi appeared beside him with a refill of his juice. "How is everything tonight?" she asked kindly. He tasted the fish and said, "Excellent. Thank you." She smiled and moved on. Quentin savored his meal and then looked up to see Serena serving the passenger next seat to him. The exchange was effortless. This was the flow he had always envisioned. Later, as dessert carts rolled through the cabin, Quentin closed his eyes. He recalled that first night when he overheard the whispered frustrations of 2 flight attendants. He felt the pang of guilt and the spark of resolve that drove him to action. He remembered Serena's soft voice offering sage advice and Lexi's guarded honesty. Those voices had been catalysts for transformation. He opened his eyes as Serena returned with a small plate of berries and chocolate mousse. She handed it to him with a gentle smile. "On the house, sir," she said. He nodded. "Thank you. This looks wonderful." She lingered for a moment. "We could not have done this without your willingness to listen." He looked into her eyes. "Thank you for speaking up." She turned and walked away, glancing back once with a look of pride. Quentin leaned back and allowed the cabin lights to dim into rest mode. He removed his shoes and slipped on slippers. He reclined his seat and closed his eyes. For the first time in a long time, he felt truly at peace on a flight. The gentle pitch of the aircraft rocked him. He thought of the upcoming quarterly town hall where Lexi and Serena would present progress to all employees. He thought of the training center where crews laughed and learned together. He thought of the ground crews now supported by better schedules and the mental health counselors on call. He thought of his parents and how proud they would be to see the company's culture upheld. He recalled his mother's words, "You can't change what you won't look at," and his father's quiet pride in every perfectly loaded cargo hold. He drifted toward sleep, comforted by the thought that honesty and accountability could transform an entire airline. Hours later, he awoke to soft light shining through the cabin. The flight was over oceans now, with dawn approaching on the other side of the world. He felt refreshed, renewed, and ready to continue the journey. He picked up his notebook one last time and scribbled a final line. Real change begins with listening and ends with action. He underlined it twice. Quentin Hale gathered his belongings and prepared for descent into Sydney. As the seatbelt sign lit up, he sat up and offered a knowing smile. He had started his journey in seat 2A to uncover hidden cracks. Now he ended it in the same seat, having begun meaningful repair. The airline soared not only on advanced jets, but on genuine collaboration, respect, and the promise that every voice matters. He rose when the door opened, greeted by the cabin crew who offered warm farewells. "Welcome to Sydney, sir," Lexi said gently. "Thank you," he replied sincerely, "and thank you for everything," Serena added with a soft smile. He stepped into the jet bridge and into a new day, carrying the knowledge that the winds of change were not temporary. They would carry VistaLux Airlines to new heights, grounded in empathy, fueled by transparency, and guided by every voice at 35,000 feet. As the cabin doors close and the sunrise over Sydney greets VistaLux's newest chapter, we're left with more than empty seats. We carry the echoes of whispered frustrations, the relief of honest dialogue, and the hope of a future where every voice matters. Quentin Hale's journey from unseen passenger to engaged leader reminds us that change begins when we choose to listen. We celebrate the triumph of empathy over indifference and condemn the quiet cruelty of discrimination. If this story moved you, show your support by liking and sharing the video. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you won't miss our next deep dive into real stories that challenge, inspire, and uplift. Thank you for flying with us. See you on the next flight.